well, first they talk about buying themselves things. They're like, well, she didn't say we had to give away all our money. Maybe we'll just buy things for ourselves, which I think is,
it's so human. So typical of kids. Yeah. Like, well, I'm going to be really generous, but I'm going to be generous to myself first.
Yeah. But I also was thinking like mother is trying to get them to be generous, but by saying no presents, they turned inward.
Mm.
Welcome to Scholé Sisters, the podcast for the classical homeschooling mama who seeks to learn and grow while she's helping her children learn and grow. Scholé Sisters is a casual conversation about topics that matter to those of us in the trenches of classical homeschooling who yearn for something more than just checking boxes and getting it all done. I'm your host, Brandy Wenzel. You can come study Charlotte Mason with me over in the Charlotte Mason Think Tank. Go to afterthoughtsblog.net/think tank to learn more. My co-hosts today are Misty Winkler and Abby Wall. Misty is a homeschooling mom of 5, including 1 graduate. She writes and podcasts at simplyconvivial.com and is the author of The Convivial Homeschool, now available on Amazon. Abby is basically the queen of the Scholé Sistership. Abby is a country-living farmer, rancher, a loving wife, and mom of 5 who homeschools and reads whenever she can. Have you joined the Scholé Sistership yet? We are really enjoying the current Sophie Seminar TechTonic. Together, we're reading our way around the screen time issue. The goal of this seminar is for us all to be better equipped to make just judgments about this issue. After all, informed opinions are the only opinions worth having. It's not too late to join the seminar. All you have to do is head on over to scholésisters.com/join and sign up for the Sophie plan. Today, we present to you our annual Christmas episode. In light of inflation and the fact that for many of us, Christmas has to be different this year compared to last year, we thought we'd go over the first couple chapters of Little Women and discuss how to feast in a time of fasting. This one was a lot of fun, and so without further ado, let's get to it.
Let's start off with our Scholé every day. Who'd like to go first?
This is Abby, and I would love to go first.
Great.
So I just got back not too long ago from visiting my good friend, Misty Winkler.
Yay.
And we, of course, went to bookshops together and coffee shops. And we went to a college, the local college in her town, New St. Andrews. And they have a little campus bookstore, I guess, coffee shop.
Yep.
It was delightful. And they had MFK Fisher's book, How to Cook a Wolf. And it was used and it was only $6. So, and I think they were having a little sale. So it was great. I was like, oh, I've been wanting to read that book, kind of the food memoir category. And I think other people have mentioned it. I have not cracked it yet, but the title itself is great. So, I mean, I feel like I need that in my life, right? To be able to know how to do this. And then while I was in the airport killing time, I also bought a book because there was actually a really great bookstore in the Seattle airport. They even had classics, and I mean, they just didn't have a lot of garbage. So it was really nice. But I picked a nonfiction national bestseller. It's been on a list for a while that I was like, oh, I should, do that. But my library has such a long hold on it. I was like, well, I'll just buy it. So it's called Peak Mind. And the subtitle is Find Your Focus, Own Your Attention, Invest 12 Minutes a Day. And I'm going to butcher the last name, her name, but it's Amishi P. Jaha, and she's a PhD. She just talks about attention and how it's hijacked, but how this actually isn't anything new, which was actually comforting to me. Because, we always think, well, if I could just get away from technology, if I could just go live in be unplugged for a while, I could just solve all my problems.
Right.
And they said, yeah, that's what monks tried to do. And even they have journals about thinking about things that they didn't want to be thinking about and their attention being hijacked. And these people were, pious and devoted to, their calling, and they still struggled with it. So it's about training the attention. I haven't gotten to the part where she actually tells us how to do that, but a lot of really interesting research into how the brain works and how attention works. It's been pretty interesting so far, and it's well written, which is always nice. So this was what she said about the monks. We have records of medieval monks in the year 420 fretting that they could not keep their thoughts on God as they were supposed to. They complained constantly that they were thinking about lunch or other things. And they felt overwhelmed with information, frustrated that the minute they sat down to read something, their restless minds wanted to read something else instead. Why could they not just focus? Why did the mind disobey? They went so far as to cut off relationships with family and give up all their possessions, the idea being that if they had fewer earthly entanglements to think about, they'd be less distracted. Did it work? No. So I loved that so much. And the rest of the book is, a little bit like, it's a lot about like, hey, it's okay. And here's how we work on it. So anyway, I'm looking forward to the 12 minutes a day I get to invest in my attention building and figuring out how to, help myself be more focused.
Well, I want to report on it because I probably won't read it, but I'd like to hear what she's having you do for 12 minutes a day.
Okay. Yeah, I will do that.
Misty?
It's like everyone went super silent.
Well, I was finished, so.
Is that how that works?
Then I was called upon. Well, my pick is my very first R.J. Rushdoony.
Oh.
So he's a theologian. He's one of those authors that I've read people who've read him. So, it's a name I'm used to seeing like in footnotes or referenced or talked about, but I've never actually read Rushdoony himself. And so I picked up, my husband actually picked up this book because there's a men's book study at our church that Matt goes to, and they just read this book. And so I thought, that looks interesting. I'll read it also. And it turns out that this fits into my Marxism category. I'm going to just slot it right in.
Oh.
And I was not expecting that, but all throughout, he contrasts biblical law and biblical understanding of liberty and freedom to Marxism. And so let me see. I think he was writing this in the 80s. I mean, he was writing it from California, so that it doesn't really matter when he was. It's like his context. Yes, 84.
We did have a day when we were free. But it was probably shortly after we left Mexico and before we joined the United States.
In the days when cowboys roamed the land.
That's right. Well, some of us still do.
So he has a whole chapter on Marxist law. It was fascinating to me because, in the readings about Marxism that I've done this year, it's very clear that Marxism is relativist. Like they don't believe that truth actually exists, or even that reality is fixed, that truth is absolute, that even reality is absolute. They think all of that can be changed. It's just accessory really to who's in charge. And so he says here in chapter 22, Marxism is relativistic. It denies that there is any absolute truth, any fundamental right and wrong in the universe. Instead of God as the source of truth and law, Marxism insists that all ideas of truth and law simply reflect the will of a ruling class. Thus, for communism, law is simply the will of the ruling class stated as statutes and legal requirements, so that the law merely mirrors the policies of the ruling class as it operates through the state. No law for Marxism has any relationship to absolute right and wrong, because no absolute right or wrong exists. And so that just got me thinking that I always assumed, I guess, that American culture was becoming relativistic. And then that's kind of parallel or not connected to cultural Marxism and all that they do go together. There's similarities, but that Marxism follows becoming relativistic. But as I was thinking through like the timeline, well, when did relativism really have a grip on our culture? And it's actually post-Marxism. So it just got me thinking about the different connections between all of that. And then later on, he has a chapter called Flight from Knowledge. He rags on the communists a bit more. And I will say that I think if I had read this before I had done a bunch of other reading on Marxism this year, I would have said, oh, he's just kind of extremist. Like Marxism's the terrible bad guy that he likes to beat up on. And I'm like, no, this is real.
Yeah.
If only people had listened in the 80s.
Oh, sad.
So he talks about education or knowledge and says that now under Marxism, the goal of learning is therefore not knowledge, but power to manipulate.
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
Yep.
So education today is under the influence of this relativistic philosophy and expression of it. Whether it is Marxist, existentialist, pragmatic, instrumentalist, progressivistic, or other forms, modern education is hostile to knowledge and in flight from knowledge.
All of the above.
Yep. The student must be divorced from meaning and knowledge and be married to power, because it is held, knowledge is power. Thus, all the traditional subjects have been changed. History is no longer treated as history, the knowledge of the past. It is social science now, the science of human control. When the past is studied, it is in terms of controlling the present. The idea that true knowledge should be the goal of philosophy is ridiculed as a pre-scientific expectation. Philosophy, too, is in a full-scale retreat from knowledge. So,
wow. It's hard to believe it was written that long ago.
I know. It was full of truth bombs that, especially seeing it 20 years later. And it's like, yeah, you don't even know the half of it, Rushdoony.
What is the name of this book? You didn't say.
Oh, this is Law and Liberty.
Okay.
And I thought Rushdoony only wrote gigantic tomes, but this one is very short. We have the paperback, but I listened to it on audio and it was only 4 hours.
Oh.
And it was read by someone with an Irish brogue. Very thick.
Oh, awesome.
It was, that made it extra entertaining.
I'm trying to perfect my Irish accent for read alouds, so I might need to listen just for that purpose.
There you go.
Not that that's the only reason, but
it was a little, it took a little extra interpretive ability. I'm not accustomed to, Psalms being called Psalm. In Sam 1. Like, who's Sam?
Yeah, really.
So, how about you, Brandy?
I am choosing a book from my not controversial 5x5 category
Whoa!
today. Turning over a new leaf.
I doubt it.
I have 2 categories that I've neglected. So one of them was the dark underbelly of medical history, but the other one is just my family category. And so I feel like maybe I started reading this on the plane to the retreat. Like I did this thing where I do this thing where I grab a new book when I get on a plane, because I'm never sure how long I'm going to be reading and whether I have enough space left. You know what I mean? Like, do I have enough left in the book I'm on? Or anyway, I want to only carry one book. So I bring a new one because then I'm pretty much guaranteed I won't finish it. Anyway, so I'm reading For the Family's Sake for the first time. It's, I've had For the Children's Sake for, I don't know how long. When I wrote Start Here, everybody was telling me I needed to include Susan Schaefer Macaulay, who I had never read. So instead of just putting in Charlotte Mason's Principles, reading her, I added For the Children's Sake. but I haven't read For the Family's Sake, which is her book on family.
Yeah.
And she is taking Charlotte Mason's principles in many ways, and not all of them, but the ones that are most pertinent to family, she's taking them and applying them to family. And it's actually a great little book. I mean, a lot of it I would say is like, well, it's not very surprising if you've read a lot of Charlotte Mason.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just not. But one thing that has really struck me is how good the book probably would be for someone who was raised in a dysfunctional family, because she just gives so many little gems of details that a lot of family books are like, here's some basic principles and here's one example. But I feel like she's describing like whole days or whole weeks or like, she just gets it's not tedious to read. Like sometimes it can get kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't want to know about this lady doing her laundry or whatever. You know what I mean? It's not like that. But I feel like for someone who did not have in their imagination a picture of what a healthy family life would look like, she has the ability to kind of weave that for you. And she gives multiple different examples because she talks about her own childhood. And then she talks about, early days when she and her husband had just a couple little kids and he was still in school, because I think he went to Oxford for his PhD or something. Anyway, so she talks about those days. And then she talks about later when they're running Labrie. And so there's just these different examples along the way of building a household that I just could see how that'd be very helpful if I don't know, I'm trying to think about how to put it. Like if you weren't raised in a family that was good, especially with their small children, good and patient and understanding and handled them well. Mm-hmm. Like this gives a really vivid picture of that. And I also feel cheated that nobody told me about first dinner and second dinner. So she acts like this is a British thing. So to our British listeners, how dare you not share this with me?
Is this like breakfast and second breakfast?
Well, it does have like a Hobbit sound. I don't think she actually calls them first and second dinner. I think that's me being Hobbitish, but she talks about having an early dinner, kind of tea time, whatever, but it's just with her kids under the age of 6. Oh. And so she like feeds them, gets them full, gives them a bath, and then they play while the more mature people are having dinner peacefully without any sort of fighting or whatever. I mean, and it does sound like she has an open floor plan where that can be happening and you're actually seeing your toddlers or whatever. But I was like, oh no, we liked to mix fighting with the child in the high chair with dinner. So that dinner was difficult. Did Susan Schaefer Macaulay do that? No, she did not. She was like, and what was really interesting to me was she talked about how, like, when you do that, it reminded me of in our family at holidays, there's the adult table and the kid table. And like, it's a big deal to get graduated to the adult table. Of course, what happened in our extended family is everybody kind of grew up at the same time. So now there's just tables everywhere and they're all at the same table. We're just not calling it the kids table. But anyway, not the point. It was kind of like, so, you can kind of say things like, oh, we better like finish learning our manners because eventually you get to eat at the big table with with the more grown-up people. And so it's kind of like this big goal. Mm. So, I mean, not that they have a graduation ceremony or anything, but it did sound like there was kind of this mental thing of like, yeah, I want to be mature and join the big people table, when I'm 6 or whatever. And anyway, a lot of it sounded brilliant, especially for those of us that had a whole bunch of little kids where meals could be stressful. The idea of feeding them, bathing them, and then letting them do their little evening play before they go to bed while I ate in peace with people who could be peaceful sounds kind of magical. So anyway, I feel betrayed that I did not know that until right now. And she also talked about putting kids to bed at 6:30, which I was like, yes, I'm so thankful that people talk about
grandkids, Brandy.
See, no one's going to want to come to my house. They're like, that's the grandma that puts us to bed at 6:30.
No, at least the fun tea time grandma who feeds them early. And then, I don't know. I feel like this could be something for the next generation.
Okay. All right.
Pass along.
Okay. I'm down for it. Yeah. Anyway, so it's been fun and I'm feeling so domestic reading about the family that I've upped my game a little bit. I mean, not in a way that anyone would notice, but I feel better about myself. So
that's always good.
Well, that's good. And that's a part of isn't that one of the reasons why you picked that category too?
It is.
Yeah. So that's great.
Is. Yeah.
Winning.
Hi, Abby here to tell you about the Sistership. Do you ever feel frustrated with social media? Scroll looking for good ideas, like beautiful pictures, and follow accounts that portray an ideal? But when you walk away, you feel distracted, dissatisfied, and disappointed with the time that you've wasted? Because what you're really looking for is connection and having real conversations about what matters most to homeschooling moms, about educational philosophy and principles, not just superficial and shallow tips and tricks. Well, the Sistership is a place for moms to dig deep into principles and practices, not to waste time. We want to help you connect and find community, not just online, but in real life. The Sistership is private, ad-free, drama-free, and free to join. Find your like-minded sisters today. Go to scholésisters.com/sistership.
Today is our Christmas episode. Woo-hoo. So exciting. When we do our Christmas episode, except for last year where we forgot to mention the word Christmas or be very festive at all, which I blame on recording it too early, that we were trying to do a Christmas episode without being in Christmas mode at all. We usually talk about things like our Don't Be the White Witch theme, and we've done variations on that over the years many times. This year, we decided to kind of take a spin on it because I don't know, I think we all agreed on this, right? Like gas is high, inflation is high. There's definitely a pinch. And so there can be this feeling of like, well, Christmas is off of the table. And so I think one of the things we've never really talked about this. In fact, I think I titled this Feasting in a Time of Fasting, where we've never really discussed approaching Christmas when you're poor, basically, like when you don't have a lot of means. What does that really look like? And can you still celebrate it? So anyway, to have this discussion, we're going to be using Misty's second favorite Christmas book, Little Women, right behind Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, which she loves. If you've listened to the past Christmas episodes, you know how much she loves it. But she also loves Little Women. And so
on the same level.
Okay. But she agreed. She graciously agreed to let us discuss Little Women, even though it's not exactly her favorite. But I do love the Christmas chapters in the beginning of Little Women, which is what we're going to go over. And actually, it's kind of funny when we were discussing at the retreat about this, I had it in my head that they gave each other oranges. And then after reading this, I decided that was actually Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was waiting for the oranges.
Yeah. So I mean, I probably put that.
I don't remember that part of the discussion.
I probably put that in your head, Misty. And Abby was like, she's wrong and discarded it. But
or was it just in the movie?
No, it's possible that was in the movie. I don't know. I feel like I've only seen the movie one of the movies one time. That's definitely possible. I mean, there is a whole tradition of giving oranges at Christmas or on St. Nicholas Day or whatever. But anyway, Little Women has this wonderful approach to Christmas, real poverty, a level of poverty that most people don't experience these days, really, with our food stamps and all those kinds of things. Like we have a lot more safety nets in our culture than we used to have. We really should start, though, with what we are celebrating and why, what we're actually celebrating and why, because Little Women is not religious at all, in the sense of how it talks about Christmas. And so I'm like, before we jump into like all the things in there,
which is probably why Misty has a problem with it and Charles Dickens, right? Like that's your whole thing. Like it's a book about Christmas that doesn't talk about the main thing.
So I will say this, I forgive Dickens for that because he's writing a fantasy novel. Honestly, in a way that I don't for Little Women, because do we really think that in the Civil War era, people didn't connect Christmas to Christ?
No,
like that's not realistic. It's true. Alcott probably didn't because of how she was raised, because she was raised in a cult.
Right.
But I'm just saying it's not actually a realistic picture of what the Civil War era Christmas would have been like. So that's my beef with it versus with Dickens. I think he's being imaginative. So it doesn't bother me any more than that Jesus isn't in Indy Wilson's books, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Okay.
I think we should go over what we're actually celebrating and why, because, well, first of all, because we're Christians, but second of all, because it informs our answer to some of these questions in a way that it does not inform Alcott's answers to these questions that we're going to be raising.
It's just like an empty altruism.
Yes. All right. So obviously birth of Christ, but anybody want to explain your take on Christmas? I should say the celebration of Christmas.
Sure. Well, coming from a home that did Santa, and maybe once in a while we would go to church. Like there was a few years there that we would go to church on Christmas, but otherwise, other than a little nativity set that we had, it was not something that was talked about, right? Like this is the reality of my upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
So the greatest gift that ever was and ever will be was, well, salvation, but like the birth of Christ, right? Like this is the ultimate gift that God came down and was fully God, fully man, and he started as a baby in a manger. I think my favorite Christmas song, even before my conversion in my late teens, was "Oh Holy Night." It's a beautiful piece of music, and it is absolutely the story of that night. I knew the story of Mary and Joseph and things like that. Like it wasn't something that I wasn't culturally aware of, but the importance of it, right? And then when I got married, they always start the night off by reading the Christmas story, right? The Luke. And that is such a different thing. And then we open presents. It's great. So it was just very different. And seeing those differences, one where you can, have a knowledge of it, but it's not integral or, woven throughout, is different. It falls a little flat, probably like, what it's trying to do here in Alcott's writing. So anyway, go ahead and go from there.
I think the main thing I was thinking was, we know that Easter is our highest celebration of the year, right? Because we're celebrating resurrection, the completion of our salvation, right? Like when that powerful moment when Christ says on the cross, it is finished, and then shows us that it's finished by his resurrection. It's such an amazing thing. But that was not possible without Christmas. It had to be preceded by the virgin birth, by the incarnation, by all these things. And so to my mind, that is equally worth celebrating, because the whole thing, Christmas to Easter, is God fulfilling his promises here on earth. The things that ancient prophets talked about for ages and ages finally came into being. And that's worth some extra time and energy and traditions around it and the whole thing. I mean, it's very human to celebrate the most important things.
Yeah. And it's celebrating when God became human, became God with us.
Yep.
Yes.
So the main reason why I wanted us to establish that is just because Alcott doesn't.
Sure.
And yet, when we talk about trying to celebrate in the context of poverty, it's not that I think she presents anything that is wrong, but I always do feel a bit of an emptiness there, because it is just moralism. Like there's no foundation underneath it of faith. Or maybe we would say the faith is in goodness itself. Anyway, so I thought we'd start with chapter 1 of Little Women, which is like it was just a great opening line, I thought, where Joe's grumbling and she says, Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents. And Meg responds to her, it's so dreadful to be poor. And they kind of start feeling bad for themselves.
Yep.
This is actually brilliant, because she's really starting us off with certain kinds of responses to poverty. I mean, I don't know how you guys grew up in terms of financial. I don't know what your early marriages looked like in terms of financial, but I'm wondering, like, have any of you ever had a time where you were like, oh, there's no there's no anything for Christmas, like that feeling, obviously it's not even true for them ultimately.
Yeah. I know when I was a kid, I didn't know it, but there were several Christmases where my grandparents had given money to my parents for Christmas gifts. So instead of them picking things out, they just gave them money to pick things out. And then that actually was all there was to get Christmas presents. But we also were fairly unsocialized homeschoolers, so we didn't have a lot to compare to. So it all seemed fun. It was, I think that a part of the dynamic going on in that first chapter of Little Women is that especially the older two, Meg and Jo, are contrasting their current reality with a previous reality. That Christmas is different than it had been in better times, which is probably more like what more are experiencing now when, inflation, gas, all the things.
Right.
It's different than it was before.
Which in some ways, I think that's harder.
Yeah.
Like we had very rough early days in our marriage financially, but because our kids didn't know any different.
Right.
I can't say that anyone was ever been out of shape about it. I really think it was more me than anything. Just like many mothers, right? We often want more than is possible for one reason or another. So,
yeah.
What did you think about mother proposing to have no presents at all? That's like on the very first page.
I think she's trying to encourage sacrifice in her children, which you can also see on Christmas morning when she asks them to give their breakfast. And so I think that she's trying to guide her children in self-sacrifice, which, is a virtue. It is a good thing. Like real love is sacrificial.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the girls' responses to that are, some of they're complaining and they're discontent. But you also see in some of their thinking about presents that they do just want to be giving as well, that they understand that presents makes the day special and presents are a way to say, I love you. They also end up using some of their money, not just for themselves, even though they contemplate using it all for themselves, and get something for their mother. So presents themselves can be sacrificial.
Okay, so that kind of makes me ask, is Jo kind of right that Christmas isn't Christmas without any presents?
I think so.
Abby, you're quiet. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. I think gifts can look differently, when there are lean times and things like that. Along with inflation, we have an inflated view of what is.
Yes.
Like our American consumerism is really, but I did have a story I wanted to share because last night we got home from evening church and it's November right now. So it's November 14th when we're recording this. So and I was sitting doing some stuff in my room and one of my twins came in and I said, are you getting ready for bed? And he goes, yeah, but I'm going to stay up in my room for a little bit. Just like you are. And I said, okay, what are you doing? He's like, decorating for Christmas. And I said, oh, did you get into the attic? And he goes, yeah, I did. I said, when did you do that? He's like, just now. I said, okay. He's like, we've put up all the lights and we're just decorating because the twins are the only ones they're sharing room. We moved their 13-year-old or 14-year-old brother out of that room for reasons only mothers know. 2 12-year-olds and a 14-year-old can cause some tension. So we've moved some people around. Anyway, so today I come in to get ready for the recording and I go in to talk to them because to tell them, to remind them that, I'm recording, not that they ever remember this in the moment. And they've got the curtains closed, the Christmas lights all around, a fake Christmas tree, the nativity set out, which will be going back downstairs. It will be going downstairs eventually. They have Christmas music playing and they are
Aw.
dancing around and singing.
Oh, they're so
to-
cute.
And I just thought, like, usually we're kind of after Thanksgiving is kind of when we start all of this, but this is the magic of Christmas, right? This is pure festivity. This has nothing to do with presents.
Yeah.
This is about celebration and getting into, we'll call it the spirit of Christmas, but I don't really love that term, but it was such a joy-filled thing. And they are loving it. They are playing at Christmas. And I just love that. And I know there are people who are like, no, you can't do that until Advent and all those things. But I don't want to stop this. This is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And they have the nativity set on a little table in the center of their room, and they have it all set up perfectly. Like they're understanding that this is the reason. So
that's great. And I think that those kind of things are what define festivity for sure.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I derailed the
No, you didn't. I love that. I was thinking in the beginning, let me see. It's like, I'm sure we all have very different publications of this. This is what makes this hard. But for me, it's on page 4.
Okay.
And they start that comparison. This is where we find out that they used to have money, right? Because it says, like, don't you wish we had the money Papa lost when we were little? And Meg's talking to Joe. So they're the 2 older sisters. But then she says, how happy and good we'd be if we had no worries. And then Beth says, you said the other day you thought we were a deal happier than the King children, for they were fighting and fretting all the time in spite of their money. And she says, so I did, Beth. Well, I think we are. For though we do have to work, we make fun ourselves and are a pretty jolly set, as Joe would say. There's that tension between what you want and what you have. That picture, actually, Abby, that you gave of your boys is so perfect, because that is like utter contentment with what you have. There was nothing new. They went and got stuff out of the attic, things that were stored away. Nobody bought anything for this to happen. And yet our temptation is to think that in order to have that, we need something new. We need money to finance something, which implies that we bought something, right? Envy takes different forms, I think. So we can envy others, but we can also envy ourselves. They're envying themselves in the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's still envy, which was this cloud hanging over them until Beth corrected it. So then we get to the later part of that chapter where first they talk about buying themselves things. They're like, well, she didn't say we had to give away all our money. Maybe we'll just buy things for ourselves, which I think is,
it's so human.
It is.
So typical of kids. Yeah. Like, well, I'm going to be really generous, but I'm going to be generous to myself first.
Yeah. But I also was thinking, like, so that's kind of funny too, that mother is trying to get them to be generous, but by saying no presents, they turned inward. They would have spent that money on presents, but because they couldn't, then they were like, well, what can I buy for me? So it kind of backfired, I guess, is what I'm thinking. Then they start realizing that their mother has needs, right? So she needs new slippers, or she needs this, that, or the other thing. And so then they decide to spend their money on her, which I think, Misty, you already mentioned that. Then that's basically the story of their presents, is that they decide to spend what little money they have on her. So that's where the presents come in. And then that takes us to chapter 2, where I think there's 2 forms of generosity, because there's the presents and then there's the charity. Just in case people listening haven't ever read this book, does someone want to kind of narrate what happened? Like, what's the form of charity?
Well, they get all their breakfast ready and their mother comes in and she has a nice letter and all that. But she says, I've been to see the Hummels, which are a very poor family with like 6 children, I think. And the mother is very sick and they don't even have a fire. They're just destitute, truly poor. And so she just encourages them to say, I think they could really use food. And all of the girls kind of grudgingly, pack it up because it's their favorite things. It's all their favorite foods. And they even talk about like their specific favorites, but they walk down And then they do see people who really do have nothing. And they even bring firewood and they light the house, and the children are just standing before it, and they actually get a good meal, and the mother is fed, and the children are cared for. And that is the main right. That's what happened for that. Okay. So the other part of this is when I first read this, I was in 6th grade. I had a teacher who did kind of a special girls book club, and this was the book she did. And that it was the same time that movie came out. So she took us to the movie after we read it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was quite a wonderful teacher. And it's been a long time since I've read Little Women. Like, I've probably not read it since I was in high school. I think I read it one more time in freshman year. But since I had never read Pilgrim's Progress until I was an adult, I absolutely had no context for the Pilgrim's Progress. We've talked about this before about, right, background knowledge. And right, I was reading this and I was like, oh my goodness, we're talking about Pilgrim's Progress here. I didn't even know it. And I think that's where the movies fall short as well, is because they don't talk about that. I don't remember it. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen the movies too, but yeah. So anyway, background knowledge would have been really helpful.
Well, when you start to look at the chapter titles, right?
I went back and looked at it today. I was like, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. I didn't get that either as a child. I reread this book a few times in adulthood because I was reading aloud to various children over the years. And I was shocked because AO year 1 or 2, I can't remember which one, assigned Pilgrim's Progress, which was the first time I had ever read Pilgrim's Progress. Yeah. And so then coming back and reading Little Women, I was like, wait, what?
And I've reread Little Men quite a few times because of book groups and things like that. And I have lots of boys, and I actually love some of the stories in Little Men.
Oh yeah.
But I have not reread Little Women. So that was just, it's just Pilgrim's Progress. And then they just talk about these things and the burdens and all. I was, yep. Okay. So I derailed us from that, but that is what happens on the charity part.
Yes. I actually think it's great that you said that, Abby, just, because I mean, how many of us didn't catch it because we had not read Pilgrim's Progress?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a common thing. Definitely gives some depth to the book too, because she's following part of Christian's journey as her story arc, really. So, okay. So I guess my question here is, in your opinion, is charity an important part of Christmas? And how does charity relate to being poor? There's a kind of 2-part question here. Or how should we relate to charity when we are poor? Maybe is a better way of putting it.
I think a part of what's happening in the story here is that after spending so much time kind of bewailing and complaining about their own situation, they realize that it could always be worse. Other people are struggling more than they are. And it puts your situation in perspective when you're looking not just at yourself and what you would like it to be, but seeing other people's situations and realizing that you don't have as little as you think. You actually still have enough to share.
That actually reminds me of the different stories in the Bible where so much comes from small things, like whether it's Jesus and the loaves and fishes, or the bottle of oil that doesn't wear out, or even to give like a more modern example in Hiding Place. I don't know if you guys have read that at any time recently enough to remember it, but like where she has the vitamins that don't run out until they get a new supply, and God just makes them laugh. So they start being generous with the vitamins, and they miraculously last longer than they should have until they have a new supply that replaces the ones that they had. Anyway, that idea of when we choose to give, God extends it sometimes in ways that we don't expect.
Well, and it talked a little bit about being a joyful giver. And I think that that's so important, right? God loves a cheerful giver, and when she's petitioning them to not do presents because others are suffering, and that, we can't do much, but we can do a little, and we can make our little sacrifices and ought to do it gladly, right? Like that was part of it. And I think that, in any kind of situation, whether you have enough or not, there will always be people with more and there will always be people with less, because that is the nature of the world that we live in, right? As much as we talk about equality and egalitarianism and all these different things, like there always will be people with more and there will always be people with less. Isn't it Teddy Roosevelt? Comparison is the thief of joy. And if we are to be joyful in all circumstances, right, comparison can't be a part of that.
I think it relates to Christmas very directly, because the kind of self-giving, sacrificial love that Marmee here is trying to teach her girls is generosity. And generosity is a fundamental part of Christmas, because we're celebrating God's generosity and we're imaging the generosity. So the whole reason that there are presents as a part of Christmas is that we're giving because God gave. So Christmas should be about giving presents and not getting presents, even though that is a fun element of it. Like we can also, we receive Christ. And so we can also enjoy receiving presents, but we should be finding ways to give. Earlier this week, I forget what I was looking for, but I was looking up a way to like crochet or to do something for some new decorations that would kind of liven up our temporary rental with very white plain walls. Like we need to do it. Really, some cheer here would go a long way. So I was looking up, like, I don't know, maybe I could crochet something real quick, or I don't know what I'm going to do. So I was looking up ideas and found this super cute little crochet taco keychain. And I pulled Ilsa over and I'm like, look at this. And she's like, that's so cute. And I said, you could probably make a bunch of these. We could get the stuff and you had to make these up for, your aunts and uncles and all that. And she got so excited because it's creative. So that's fun. You're making something and it's small and cute and fun and something to be giving. One of the things that we do on my husband's side of the family, we decided that everyone in the family does not need to get everyone presents every year, because we actually just don't need the stuff.
Yeah.
But having presents, like there is an element of presents that is a part of the celebration.
Right.
Especially with the kids. And so what we do is all the cousins get one another candy.
That's fun.
So it's super easy and fun because we just take the kids to any old store and they pick out something that's, $1 or under $1 for they will also do their siblings and their cousins. And then they get to wrap them as well. And it's just a part of making it fun, but it's not super expensive and it's not time consuming.
So I would love to just stop for a moment before we go through some of the other things on my list and give some examples of like what forms have charity, gift giving, generosity, like what forms have you seen those take? I'm thinking specifically, all of us can imagine like, and then I bought him his dream bike, right? Like we can all imagine that. I mean, the little things that are accessible, because I just know, my dad, okay, so there was a very poor family on our block growing up. And I remember my dad used to just be so annoyed because he was like, the parents in this family just would not wait for Christmas. They did not have the means to give their children a good Christmas. But, we lived somewhere where it wasn't super cold and wasn't super rainy or whatever. So they could have waited to give the little gloves that they gave their kids at the beginning of the cold season. They could have waited on new socks or whatever, just to make it where they had something to open on Christmas. And they never did. And it drove my dad crazy because he would see the kids with new little tiny odds and ends, like 2 weeks before Christmas. And he was just like, they could have wrapped that up and made it a present. And instead, the kids are going to feel like they didn't get anything.
Oh, we totally wrap up anything. It's like, nothing new, you don't get anything. You can wait for 2 months and it'll be a present.
Yes. Yeah. We have a rule. Like you can't buy yourself anything in October, like October on. You just can't. So I'm just wondering, like, so little things, because those were little things, the little pair of gloves from the dollar store or whatever. Those are little things that could have waited. What are some of the little types of generosity that you've seen over the years?
Well, one time it was, I don't know, the middle of summer, end of summer. It was kind of already getting past the pool season, but all the pool kind of accessories were on clearance, but it was too late to really use them that year anyway. But I was like, oh, this would have been fun if we'd had this, for going to a friend's pool or whatever. And so I picked up just something for everyone from the clearance section that were pool accessories, but they were Christmas presents, like they were stocking stuffers.
Nice.
Because they would have maybe used them once or twice at that point. And it might be weird to get pool things, at least maybe not in California, but in Washington, that would be odd to get pool things at Christmas. It's not seasonally appropriate, but it is just something fun and unnecessary, just fun. So it can wait.
Yeah.
And then
it gives you something to look forward to. Too.
Exactly.
We went to Aldi when we were in Texas.
Yes.
And we stocked up on fun little European chocolates and things like that.
Oh,
and I also really I don't get up to IKEA very often, but they also have fun little treats that my kids like. So
or Trader Joe's.
Yeah, Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's is less.
We don't have it.
Yes. Yeah, we have it in my town. So Trader Joe's is not that. It's not the phenomenon that it is for the Winkler household, but yes, they do come in fun package sizes and things like that. So it always is good. One thing that my kids do also enjoy is they will buy like $5 gift cards for a coffee shop, and they give those out to cousins and different things like that. We draw names for cousins and we have a limit. But even the little babies get stuff. They get included. And there's, 15 or 16 grandkids now on my husband's side. So it's quite fun and they just all love it. There are some people in our family that don't love presents or they're hard to buy for. And oftentimes they want gifts of service. So my mother-in-law usually requests gold toe socks and work days where everybody comes over and helps with pruning and gardening and, kind of the fix it things. And she loves that. And it's so helpful for her to kind of get her house, or her yard and different things, the bigger projects in order. And my kids have really enjoyed doing that for her on a different day.
That's a great idea.
It is.
And that fits in with it doesn't have to cost a lot of money.
That's right.
That's so true. Yes.
It's not about how much is spent.
Mm-hmm. Yep. When the kids were little, they would make little coupons for their dad. I would help them expel things.
Yeah.
They would be like a back scratch, 5 minutes of back scratching or whatever, because it's like they didn't have any money. So they were just like, what is he like? Or when they were little, he liked them to walk on his back. Yeah. So they were like, we will walk on your back for 3 minutes.
Yes, some of my boys offered cleaning and detailing services of the teenagers who are driving vehicles.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So that was a great thing for younger siblings to vacuum out and wipe everything down and clean it all up. And so they gave them like 3 to 5 or something like that. And let me tell you, that teenager that received those was like, get out there right now. I need that cleaned.
That's amazing.
So
I guess I have a couple examples. I mean, the first is just one of charity. So this was, I want to say this was 2 Christmases ago, but my girls have been working on learning to embroider for, I don't know, probably 3 years now or something. So like a year into it, they got to where they could make things that were worth keeping. And around that time, our church had been given land. and was starting to work on building a building, which we're still starting to work on building a building because turns out no one's in a hurry to like approve permits or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it was kind of like that whole like kicking off the vision thing. And so everybody was into it and wanting to help the church, earn money or whatever. So they like made little cute embroidered, like in little hoops, little tiny hoops. They made little embroidered ornaments that in Christmas colors said things like joy or whatever, and sold them on Facebook to family and friends. But anyway, so after their costs of their materials, the money went to the church for the building. And that was like their little personal Christmas fundraiser. Fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, but another thing I was just thinking was years ago when we had very few resources, I don't know if I did this 4 years or 5 years, it felt like forever. But we would have a day where the great grandparents would come over and babysit the kids, and I would leave all day, sometimes 2 days in a row. But I was working at we had like this big, huge secondhand thing. I don't even know what to call it. It was like a once a year sale where they would rent out this whole huge facility, like a big former department store at a mall or whatever, and fill it with all of this secondhand stuff that was actually pretty decent quality. They had decent standards. But if you worked at the sale, then you got certain benefits for that. I can't remember exactly what they were, but it made it even easier to get good things at the sale, basically. I mean, that was how I got their Christmas gifts because, little kids, they don't know that it's secondhand or whatever. So my girls still talk about, we got this adorable, it was like Samsonite luggage that looked like ladybugs. It was so cute. So cute. But I got the set for the two girls it was like $15 total for the two of them. They each got their own little suitcase to take when they went to sleep at grandma and grandpa's house or whatever. But I mean, that's how for years, I would take whatever my budget was for Christmas, for 4 kids, sometimes it was less than $100. And it was just, I could spend it there and get really decent things for them. And then we kind of rounded out with the used bookstore where we, buy books for $1, and it was great. So finding ways to get nice things very inexpensively, it takes different forms. Some people do garage sales, but I mean, it's not like everything has to be new to give it. It just has to be new to them, especially when they're little, So anyway, but I would get all sorts of nice little things just from working 2 days a year. So it was, I didn't have to have an out of the house job forever or anything. I try to remind my kids because they were young enough that I don't know that they all remember it, but I'm like, I want you to remember, not because I want them to like thank me, but just because I want them to know there are ways. If you are determined, there are ways to do these things and to make sure that there's something special for Christmas.
Yeah. Cause I think it's not special because of how much it cost. It's special because someone thought about you and took time to do something for you to, make the day special or to make you feel special. And that doesn't have to cost a lot of money. But sometimes we would rather spend money than effort.
Right. Yeah. There's a certain amount of effort required to be thoughtful, even.
Yeah.
You see that sometimes where you get the impression that the expensive gift is making up for actually a lack of effort in the thoughtfulness category.
Right.
Okay. So I was hoping we would talk about other things that we see in the chapter that are not gifts, but that make the day special, that make the day
and besides the neighbor showing up with the amazing feast.
Right. Yeah. I put it in the notes. Note, it is highly unlikely that your rich next door neighbor is going to swoop in and make Christmas magical for you. Even though that feels amazing, I will say that has never yet happened at our house. So,
well, I think, like we were talking about earlier, a little festivity, right? Food, music, decorations, like these are all part of that, right? Celebrating. The part she does talk about though is, It was when they give Marmee all of the gifts. And there was a good deal of laughing and kissing and explaining in the simple, loving fashion, which makes these home festivals so pleasant at the time, so sweet to remember long afterward. And then all fell to work, right? Like there was this moment where they want to talk about what they did too. Like, well, we just couldn't, and that whole explaining, like how often do children give their gifts that they've taken time and effort to like make you and everything like that. And they want to tell you about it. Right. Or finding this thing like, oh, I can't, and even that's part of like when we find something and we know, even if it's just something small and thoughtful, right? Like when you're so excited to watch them open it because you know that you've nailed it because you've gotten it. They're going to love this, right? Which my children never appreciate the books that I thoughtfully carefully select for them to like, oh, a book. Thanks, Mom.
I loved that the children put on a play because on one side of my family, I had this older cousin and she was in ballet. So she'd bring like all her old costumes and she would plan these elaborate plays and we would put them on as the entertainment at different family functions, especially Easter and Christmas. Some of my favorite memories from when we were really young was, well, it wasn't even just the play. It was that I got to dress up in her really cool ballet costumes because I wasn't in ballet at that time. And so it was just so exciting. But encouraging that kind of behavior, it actually is so fun for kids to do that. And their plays were way more interesting. The play that they put on. And of course they're older, they're like teenagers. I'm pretty sure.
And my kids acted out the Christmas story. And because we have a ton of dress ups and we have a ton of cheap costumes, obviously. So there was a lot of shepherds and a lot of sheep, for all the little kids who could be the extras in the play, which were hilarious.
Well, I think both your thing that you just described and what was described in the book was probably more interesting than what we were doing as kids, but we had a great time. And it was special because it wasn't something that we did all of the time. Like it was rare for all of the cousins to be together at one time with enough time to put something like that together. So I do feel like there's different things like that where it's like, even though your extended family are people that you see regularly, usually the Christmas celebration is more prolonged than the other things. The quick 2-hour birthday party that has to include all the little elements of a birthday party or whatever is not the same as the lounging kind of thing that happens with Christmas, at least in my family. And so, there's different traditions. Like I know the tradition of football on Thanksgiving afternoon after we eat or whatever, like just all those things can be so special, but actually they don't cost anything. I mean, you bring the ball, or my cousin was bringing the costumes or whatever. I mean, it was just special, fun traditions that the children actually had invented for themselves, really.
Yeah. Something different, out of the ordinary to do together.
So food on a low budget was on my list because I feel like Marmee, I know they ended up giving away their breakfast, but it looked to me like she had done something special. Like this was not their normal breakfast that they gave away. They gave away something that to them was pretty nice. So in addition to being extra, presents are extra to life, food is another place where traditionally at Christmas we do more special. So then how do you think that relates to a low budget or a lower than usual budget? Like, let's say you really do not have the budget that you normally have for Christmas dinner or Christmas breakfast or whatever special at your house like that. So then what would you do to still make it special?
I think anything that's out of the ordinary can feel special. So if it's just different than usual, and then maybe, using nicer dishes.
Yeah. Presentation.
If you already have them, but things you don't usually use, you can dress it up in inexpensive ways, or, just popcorn, but you get one of those little extras sprinkling something and everyone sprinkles a little something. just something that's out of the ordinary for your family, where you can spend time together eating.
Mm-hmm.
Eating brings people together. So if it's just putting a whole bunch of candles from, the dollar store, or just from the collection in the closet that's just been sitting there for a long time. Or we moved. So I don't know. I cleared out a lot of cupboards, and it's like, wow, I have a lot of candle odds and ends.
And I think too, cooking from scratch, while it takes more time, is a lot more economical. True. I think that people who spend a lot more money on groceries than I do, and it's partly because of mostly done meals, right? That they're, convenience foods. Yeah. It does take time and effort to do from scratch cinnamon rolls, but I mean, that's our tradition on Christmas morning. And I actually make them weeks ahead of time. I'm actually planning on doing it this weekend. I make Pioneer Woman's cinnamon rolls, and they go in the freezer really well. And they have a coffee maple icing on them. They're awesome. Mm-hmm. And I put them in pie pans, and I just freeze them. And then I pull them out throughout the year, but always on Christmas morning. And they just warm up so nicely. And and it
really doesn't cost a lot to make.
No, they don't. It does take time. And you could even probably use less butter than the Pioneer Woman suggests. But they are excellent. And that is something that is out of the ordinary. And I know that people can, roll out a can of Pop Biscuit type cinnamon rolls, right? Pillsbury. But there is something special about you making them and your kids seeing it, because it is a process, and your kids see this. And my kids are like, "Ooh, are you putting those in the freezer for Christmas morning?" Yep, I'm going to do that, So I do think there are things that we can make, because flour is still relatively reasonable, and water and yeast are not out of hand for homemade bread. Mm-hmm. And I've even made these cinnamon rolls gluten-free. And if you add a little plain protein powder to it, they make pretty nice cinnamon rolls as well.
Oh, I think I might need you to help me with that.
Mm-hmm. I can do that.
That's always my hard part, is my gluten-free kids. Yes.
And how special does my son think it is when he has like 6 pans in the freezer for himself? Like, he's like, I am going to, and no one gets them because he's the gluten-free kid. So, because I make the same amount for everybody.
Nice. Yes. I was thinking also with food, I mean, canned foods especially last like forever. We could have a nuclear war and the canned food's probably still fine. And so we can watch year round for cans of things that would be like for sales on cans of things that would be valuable at Christmas. I know certain special holiday recipes call for very specific things like condensed milk or whatever, you know what I mean? And like those kinds of things, sometimes you can find them really cheap at a grocery outlet or whatever. I think maybe keeping an eye toward Christmas throughout the year.
Yep.
Which, I mean, it's hard to say that right now, because now it's like we're in crunch time, right? But that kind of an approach helps Christmas be less expensive, less taxing on the budget. My mom and I have a tradition of going to after Christmas sales, which have really decreased in quality over the years. Like, they're not nearly what they used to be. I feel like COVID killed after Christmas sales, but for years we've done that because it is one of the cheapest ways to get decent wrapping paper, decent decorations, that kind of thing. I mean, you only get the leftovers, but at the same time, you get them at like 75% of the original price. Anyway, so we've always done that. So like at Christmas time, I'm never trying to buy wrapping paper or decorative ribbon or anything like that. Like, we already bought it at the end of last year, which helps because last year I didn't know about inflation. Last year this time.
Well, and the month of November, whenever I go grocery shopping, I try to use a portion of my budget for stocking up. I have a butter budget because butter is required for a lot of cookies and different things like that. And so I just try and add a couple extra, boxes of butter to my thing. And then maybe we don't get, I don't stock up on other stuff. So I do try to think about a stocking up portion of my budget. My budget's still the same, but I'm focusing my attention on, sorry, interruption, letting me know where he's going. But anyway,
You're overachieving.
Butter and things like that, because that is one thing that has really gone up is all milk and dairy products.
Yeah.
Insane. And I mean, you can imagine 5 teenagers in my house. We eat a lot of butter and drink a lot of milk. So I've definitely noticed the pinch there, but maybe making different things, and we can eat beans and rice a few more times throughout the weeks leading up to Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So
compensate.
Yeah.
Then that can make Christmas feel extra special. Yeah.
That's true.
Little contrast.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole, some traditions fast
Right
before Christmas. And I could see how that definitely emphasizes Christmas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our traditions that we always do Christmas Eve is kind of a appetizer meal. And one of the things that I love to do is get the little wonton wrappers. They're usually either in the Asian food section at your grocery store or like at Asian markets, and they're relatively cheap. But if you deep fry them with like a little bit of cream cheese in them and then serve them with like a sweet chili sauce, my kids love it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't know, $3 for a package of 50 of these wonton wrappers. So that's a fun tradition that we do.
Hey, anything deep fried.
That's right. And we don't do a lot of deep fried things. So my kids think it's so much fun to kind of do appetizer meals. And, it takes some work, but everybody kind of loves having little bites of things, and it feels very celebratory. So.
Okay. So here, rapid fire, because we got to wrap this up. Rapid fire here. Other things, non-food, non-present traditions that don't cost a lot of money that you've enjoyed either with your children or even in your childhood. Just give some examples. And I think also they could just be part of Christmas season. They don't necessarily have to be like, this is what we did on Christmas Day.
Christmas caroling.
I like that one. I was thinking going to look at Christmas lights. We've always done that where you just kind of drive around, or even if you can't afford the gas, drive to one place and stop and walk.
Mm-hmm.
Spending time with family, we do game nights often during Christmas break, and that doesn't cost anything. And usually everybody brings like a little treat to share, and then we have a great time.
Christmas movies.
Oh yeah. Christmas movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've done, different after dinner family devotionals, using either Cindy Rowland's Messiah study.
Yeah.
Or we've done a Jesse Tree reading. And at one point years ago, I made a little set of felt ornaments to go along with each story, because the Jesse Tree kind of follows the line of promise from creation to Christ, telling that history, story by story, over the whole Advent season. And so that's a favorite tradition.
Hot cocoa. We always do. We have a little Advent calendar that just has a little movable piece. So it kind of does a countdown to Christmas. And sometimes we'll put like little fun things in the pockets. Not every time, but just like we're going to have a hot cocoa night, or one of those things, like make popcorn or something like that. Like, and sometimes we have like little treats or things like that. But it lessens it. It doesn't have to be daily. It's just, every once in a while we have fun things in these little pockets.
We do Christmas read alouds.
Oh yeah, we do too.
Like I usually buy one new book a year that has a Christmas theme. And then we always read Misty's first favorite book.
Well,
Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol.
I read every year, which other friends of ours, they're skeptical. They're not too sure on this, but I read The Best Christmas Pageant Ever by Barbara Robinson, because it makes me.
I don't read it every year, but I do love to read it.
It makes me laugh so hard, and it always it brings joy to my heart. So yes.
I feel like that whole story could have taken place in the little town I grew up in. So I think that's why I love it. Is I was like, I feel like I know these people.
And I have some like picture books too that we love. And our
Yeah.
library has an excellent selection of it. So I don't even buy all, I don't even own all of them. I know some people do, like, they wrap the different Christmas books and they do kind of like an Advent read aloud of picture books, but we just have a basket of books that I put away for the rest of the year. And then I bring them out and they are under the tree when we do that. So
I know Dawn Duran, she did this thing where she bought like burlap bags or something like that. Maybe they were linen. Anyway, and just she puts them in bags each year so she doesn't have to wash them.
Yeah.
I mean, she doesn't have to wrap them. So it's like she can have that tradition of opening the picture book without going through the trouble of wrapping everything every year. Which, if she had told me about that earlier, I probably would have done it. But instead I was like, here's the book.
my neighbor did do a candy cane hunt. So it's like Easter eggs, but you hang candy canes around. And so the kids all got to do a candy cane hunt one year. And that was kind of fun.
Oh, that's fun. We do homemade Christmas ornaments. Every year we choose something. It gets more elaborate as the years have gone on. But then we make a bunch of them. Like, we choose something like on Pinterest. We'll find some sort of DIY that we actually have the skills to do. And so we'll make a bunch of them.
I need you to send me that, because I need ideas. And some of them look so silly and not good. So I want good ones.
Oh yeah. I'll have to send you. I think I have a Pinterest board I could send you where I've like done my ideas, but so actually YouTube's a good place to look at it too, because then you can see how they make it and decide if you're willing to do that. Some of them, I just can't. Well, especially because we make them and we give them like as hostess gifts. We'll use them at the co-op ornament exchange. We
have a few on our tree.
That's right. We will send one because my daughter and Ilsa are pen pals. She mails one to Misty's daughter every year. But it's like that kind of thing where we are making a whole big bunch of them. And so I cannot do the ones that take an hour each.
Right.
Because we don't have that kind of time. So, but yeah, there's been really fun ones like that. And some of them are really inexpensive. Like, I think one year, we made salt dough.
Oh yeah.
And, we're just cutting them out with stars. But what was fun was that the tutorial we saw, they had you go find like natural type things outside and press them into the dough to give it like some texture. And so it was things like go find like sprigs from not a palm tree. That would be a different time of year. That would be California. Yeah, it would have worked. But like a pine tree or like berries or something, but you could kind of like texture it and then cut it out so that each of the ornaments looked a little bit different and had some texture. It wasn't just like flat white salt dough, but super inexpensive. You tie it with a ribbon and you're good to go. It was fun. Anyway, we do that every year.
That's a great one.
Oh, and then we also do, now this does cost, but we bake and then deliver to the neighborhood.
Oh, nice.
That was something my mother always did. And so it's something that we've always done. But, like some years, if we have fewer resources, it can be simpler. Like, it doesn't have to be that we make 5 different recipes and pricey ingredients and stuff. We could just make, one thing that was really super yummy or something like pumpkin bread or something.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. I've given away canned goods that I've made, like jams. And I smoked salt last year on my Traeger grill. So it was like smoked salt, which was really easy. And I found cute little jars to put them in. And I've done herbs from my garden before that I've dried. And for people that I know who like to cook and things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we've done a lot of things like that. I remember my mom making fruitcake, and I know everyone has like, fruitcake, but it was delicious. And I remember helping her make it. And that was a really great memory, actually.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've probably belabored this long enough, but hopefully Little Women has taught us that poverty and Christmas are not mutually exclusive. We can always celebrate in some way. It's just that this year might need to be smaller than previous years.
But making it special is about putting the love and attention into it.
Yes.
That's how you make it special.
Amen.
Yes.
So with that said, I did want to invite everyone to use our annual Don't Be the White Witch hashtag on Instagram. where we encourage you to not have a home in which it is like Narnia, always winter and never Christmas. You can see our original Christmas podcast for that. I'm sure Misty will link it in the
Show notes. Yeah.
Show notes.
Yes.
I don't know why lately, Misty, when I say her name wrong, it comes out as mystery. And yet somehow that feels appropriate. So, because you do enjoy being mysterious.
My dad always did say that it's short for mystery, not mistake.
Oh.
That's amazing.
Can we have a hashtag in sistership as well?
Well, funny thing, on December 8th, hashtags are coming out in sistership.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So, by the time we actually want it, we will be able to have it.
Awesome.
So yes, we totally can, because then people can post. They don't have to be on Instagram in order to participate, and they can totally post different little things,
Festivity
along the way to, I mean, I love that hashtag because I get ideas from people.
Mm-hmm. It's very fun.
So, all right. Well, this has been fun. See, isn't it better to record a Christmas episode closer?
Yes. My twins think they're ready.
That's right.
Like, now it's time to take action.
That's right. Shout out to Abby's twins for
leading the
inspiring us.
charge. I don't know if everyone else is ready because they were trying to put the radio station on because there's an all Christmas station that has already started. And one of my kids was like, no, it is way too early. Sounds just like his dad.
Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for coming. This was
and
so
Merry
fun.
Christmas.
And Merry Christmas. That's right.
That's it for today. And that's not just it for today. That's it for season 19. Thank you so much for listening and being a part of the sisterhood of the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend and then discuss it with her. This is a great way to continue the conversation. All of the books and things we mentioned today are linked in our show notes. Just go to scholésisters.com/SS116 to check it out. Don't forget to sign up for the Scholé Sistership and join us for the TechTonic seminar. Just go to scholésisters.com/join and become a Sophie member. If you join soon, you'll also get our amazing and fun Sophie Christmas gift. Remember to follow us in your podcast app so you won't miss the first episode of season 20. We have lots of grand plans for next season, and I think you're really going to love it. Until then, we want to remind you once again that homeschooling is a marathon you needn't run alone, so open up your eyes and look around you. Find your sisters.
Oh, well, my hair is all wet because I just got out of the shower because I went and worked out.
Well, would it be a podcast if you didn't mention it?
I don't know.
It's a new requirement.
That's right.
I am recording a podcast. Please shut the door
children are
and
here.
don't come in. Yep, they're already here. Could you let everyone else know, which I already told
We're
you
checking
guys,
all the
but
boxes
don't open
right
the door.
away.
Like, I need to buy a book.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody tell her which book to buy. We can do it all in 5 minutes. Well, I'm getting it. Thank you.
Look at that. I made her buy a book first, Misty.
It's only 2:10 and we've done it all. We've checked all the boxes. Well, I mean, except for recording the episode, but I mean,
Yeah. we need to do
official in
that.
every way.
Oh, and we have to actually mention Christmas this year. So